Noel Pearson, welcome to the program.
Good morning, David.
So looking at all of those numbers, what do you think? Can you still win this?
Absolutely. The history of our organised rights struggle on behalf of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people started in the 1930s, and every battle we have won over the past century has been uphill. We've always been the underdog. It's always been very hard for us, but we have won gains over these years, over these decades. And we won the Native Title decision with Mabo. We won the Native Title Act 30 years ago. We got justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples under the common law of Australia, and justice has played out over the past 30 years. All of these gains are not easily won. We have persuaded governments and we've persuaded the Australian people of the gains that we've made. We're always the underdog. With 3% of the population, we are the most powerless people in the country. We're the weakest political constituency in the country, but through persuasion and through argument and through constant campaigning, we've managed to make gains. We're the underdog in this referendum, but I still believe we can achieve victory.
So what gives you that confidence? And can I ask, is there anything that needs to change in the campaign to turn this around? Because it's clear that that sentiment isn't turning.
Well, there's a distillation of our message in relation to what we're doing here. The first thing we're doing very clearly, very plainly, very simply is we are recognising Indigenous people in the Constitution through these words: in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia. It's that simple. And I don't believe reasonable, decent Australians will say no to that. We've extended the hand of invitation and friendship and, dare I say it, love to our fellow Australians. I don't believe we will be repudiated on October the 14th. How could you turn away the hand of invitation and friendship and settlement? A lot of young people I speak to, young Australians who are going about their lives, raising their young families, developing businesses, getting first into employment, they say to me, just get this thing done, mate. We need to move on.
But
we need to settle this.
Do you fear, Noel Pearson, that Australians may well have goodwill towards recognition, reconciliation, the settlement that you talk about, but don't necessarily like this model of this body?
We've had 15 years developing this model. There's been lots of consultations all around the countryside. This attempt to separate recognition from us, setting up an advisory committee, that's what it is, an advisory committee to the government and to the parliament so that government can best help us with better policies and better solutions. I actually think that when Australians actually concentrate on the real meaning of what's going on, they say, oh, that sounds pretty reasonable. That's something we can back. It's just that politics has entered the frame. Politics has kind of extrapolated from the true meaning of this advisory committee and made it into something that questions have been raised about and unreasonable misrepresentations have been made about the voice. But when you boil it down to its core, it is an advisory committee. It can't direct the parliament. It is there so that we can produce better results in the future for our people. And if we do good things for our people and our people start to improve, the country improves.
We'll come back to some of the concerns that are there about it, but just on Peter Dutton's suggestion that this should be called off, that it's not too late to call it off. The writs still haven't been issued, that'll happen tomorrow. Do you fear at all that there's more harm than good in continuing with this, or do you think it's worth it, whatever the polls are showing?
Well, firstly, we are on Camp 4. I've never gone up Everest. I'm going up Everest for the first time, and we're at Camp 4, not far below the summit. These next 5 weeks represent our chance to get to the top, Australia's chance to finally put this issue behind us, to finally feel good about something big that we've done for the country. But can I say about the Leader of the Opposition that he proposed a second referendum
What do you
last
think of that
Sunday?
idea? What do you think of that
And
idea?
by Thursday, it's ridiculous. But it's ridiculous in their own terms because they themselves killed it on Thursday. So you had the Leader of the Opposition saying, let's have a second referendum, and then his own Indigenous Affairs spokesman kills it on Thursday night. And not only that, his coalition partner is absolutely not going to entertain another referendum. The fact is, we will never get a referendum for constitutional recognition out of these people. They are here for constant debate, constant argument, interminable conflict and debate. They want this issue to go on for another 5 years. They want this issue to never end. They love conflict and disputation. Whereas the Yes campaign are saying, we do this on October the 14th, we settled one of the biggest issues the country still has outstanding. It's outstanding. John Howard called it in 2007, unfinished business.
So when Peter Dutton says
business.
he's serious about recognition, symbolic recognition, you don't even believe him on that. You don't think he would do it?
Well, it has been eviscerated. His belief last Sunday has been eviscerated by his own Indigenous Affairs spokesperson.
Well, she has
So
not
that's
yet. Jacinda
already
Numping,
happened
the price
now.
you're talking about, she has not yet backed the idea of a second
Correct.
referendum.
Correct.
But for Peter Dutton's part,
and of course,
do you
the
doubt
Nationals
that he's
are not
actually
in
serious about
agreement
this?
with it either.
Do you doubt Peter Dutton's serious about this?
Sorry?
You doubt Peter Dutton's serious about this?
Oh, no, absolutely not. The second referendum thing is a mirage. If you want something real, if you want to vote on something that puts this issue behind us, and not only that, seizes the happy opportunity we have. If you want to seize the happy opportunity, vote yes on October the 14th.
But if it were a future government proposing purely symbolic recognition, what do you say to that concept? And would you campaign against the idea of purely symbolic recognition?
Well, David, you'll recall that the 1999 referendum had its symbolic recognition as the second question. It failed, David. It fared worse than the Republic itself. So symbolic recognition is not supported by Australians. We already have a precedent from 20 years ago with the 1999 Republic referendum. It is an absolute mirage that it's a kind of, the Leader of the Opposition is trying to have his cake and eat it too. But, you know, it's like chuck the cake overboard and then somehow we're going to get a chance to eat it later. It's just an absolute mirage. And the thing that it does, it pushes this debate for another 5 years. We're already 15 years into it. John Howard promised this thing, David, as you will recall, on the election eve 2007, and we're now 15 years later. Peter Dutton wants to kick this can and get the debate and the division and the argument going for another 5 years. Wait till he becomes Prime Minister, he says, and then we'll have another go at it.
Well, to be clear, John Howard didn't
It'll
propose
never
the
happen.
idea of an Indigenous voice. Let's talk about some of the concerns around what is being proposed here. One of the main concerns has always been that this is going to create division. Senator Price articulates this concern that inserting a new body in the Constitution will permanently separate Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. Now, I appreciate there are already race powers there in the Constitution, but what do you say to this criticism that the voice will divide?
Oh, David, you half answered your own question there. The separation was there in 1901. The original separation, the original inequality was in our Constitution in 1901. What we're going to do in 2023 is fix that exclusion, fix the omission, fix the lack of recognition. And when we do that, our Constitution will be whole. We will complete the Commonwealth of Australia, and it'll be a great thing to do.
The other main concern that's raised, particularly by Peter Dutton, is the scope of the voice. A number of Conservatives, as you know, did not want this to be a voice to Parliament and executive government. I want to ask where this idea came from, because the Uluru Statement doesn't mention executive government, nor the Referendum Council, of which you were a part. So where did this idea come from, that it's a voice to executive government as well?
Oh no, it was always there. When it was first proposed to Tony Abbott in 2014 by myself, Julian Lisa, Professor Greg Craven, Professor Anne Toomey, Professor Marcia Langton, we all wrote to Tony Abbott in 2014. The words executive government were in there. And by the way, let me just explain the importance of the executive government bit. It's like, yes, you want to be able to talk to Jim Hacker on Yes Minister, but if you're not talking to Humphrey, Sir Humphrey, you're going to get nowhere. You've got to talk to the bureaucrats. They're the ones who affect our lives. And so having a voice to the bureaucrats, to the executive government, is extremely important. But can I say this, that in relation to the scope, the actual provision, what we're voting for on October the 14th says, on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. That's the scope.
Yeah, but there has been a lot of debate
about... It's on matters relating to our people.
Sure, but there's a lot of debate around what that refers to. Do you ever wonder whether you would have been better leaving that to put in law, to put in legislation, the executive government, to ensure you have more support across the aisle?
David, your reference to debate about this, you've got to be fair to us. Was it reasonable debate? Was it objective debate? Was it accurate debate, or was it just fear-mongering?
Well, perhaps some of it was fear-mongering.
In relation to this scope issue, David, in relation to this scope issue, our opponents in the No campaign said that somehow we'd be dictating policy on nuclear submarines. That wasn't reasonable.
I mean,
that wasn't a fair representation of the scope.
Clearly some of it's far-fetched, but my point is, should more effort have gone into winning over that bipartisanship, which even you have previously acknowledged in last year's Boyer lectures, is so critical to the success of a referendum?
Oh, we worked for 14 years. Out of the last 15 years, we put 14 years of assiduous spade work with the Conservatives. I can tell you myself, I never talked to a Labor MP or leader of the opposition. Who I talked to were National Party MPs and senators, Liberal Party MPs and senators, and our attempt all along was to maintain bipartisanship on this, and we maintained it for 9 years. This thing would not be alive had we not maintained bipartisanship. The bipartisanship, David, broke when Little Proud, forced by the Indigenous Affairs spokesman, decided suddenly late last year that they would be opposing the voice, whereas previously they had supported it.
So you're saying this was Jacinta Price's doing?
Oh, she's obviously been a very compelling arguer in favour of the No case. In fact, I think she set the policy for the National Party, and of course the Liberals followed later. I mean, we saw it in the last week, right? The leader says we're going to have a second referendum, and then 4 days later the spokesman says no way. So it's the spokesman that determines the policy here, not the leader of the opposition. And that's unfortunate that bipartisanship has broken, but that does not mean this is not suddenly the wrong thing to do, because this has been a policy commitment, a bipartisan policy commitment for 14 out of the 15 years.
Noel Pearson, what will it say about the country if Australia does vote no?
Listen, I'm not going to cast kind of prospective judgment on the people of Australia on this, when I still believe we have every opportunity over the next 5 weeks to listen to the concerns of those Australians who have questions and reservations.
But do you think Australia
if the
can
Yes campaign does it?
Can Australia still celebrate, in the way it does, Indigenous history and culture if it's voted no to this?
No, well, as I say, David, I'm not going to make judgment about... I'll make that judgment the day after the referendum. At this stage, I believe we still have the capacity to do the right thing. I'll tell you one thing, though, David. I just don't believe when the hand of friendship and reconciliation is extended from Indigenous people that at the end of the day, their love will be unrequited. I just can't believe that. I cannot believe we still live in an Australia where that hand would be just slapped aside. This unrequited love is my worst nightmare. I just don't believe Australians are capable of that at this time in our history.
Noel Pearson, appreciate you joining us there from Townsville this morning. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, David.